Good morning. Good to have you with us. I'm Joe Fryer.
And I'm Savannah Sellers. We're going to begin this hour with the latest in the U.S.-Iran war. Overnight, the U.S. carried out its 12th night in a row of strikes on Iran, killing at least 2 people, according to Iranian officials. Iran says it hit back by targeting U.S. bases in Kuwait.
These retaliatory strikes come as President Trump attempts to juggle the war with the upcoming midterm elections. In Georgia, the president delivered a rally-style speech, while earlier in the day, he was at Dover Air Force Base for the dignified transfer of 4 U.S. service members killed in action. NBC News Washington correspondent Alice Barr joins us with more on all this. Alice, good morning.
Good morning, Joe and Savannah. President Trump has said that he won't let political calculations affect his decisions about the war, as he has now faced its human toll, saying before meeting the families of the fallen that he could tell them only that the nation loves their children, a nation now in mourning for 4 young lives lost. President Trump coming face-to-face with the war's costs at the dignified transfer ceremony Wednesday, honoring 4 fallen soldiers as they return to American soil, all killed in the Iran war in the last week.
It's one of the hardest things to do as a president, but has to be done.
The president met with the families of Sergeant Angel Rampersad, Private First Class Isabella Gonzalez, Captain Tyler James Feehan, and Staff Sergeant Michael Emmanuel Swinton. He was killed in an Iranian drone incident in Iraq. The 3 others killed when Iran struck their base in Jordan. Sergeant Rampersad's family focused on how she lived.
She stood up for those who couldn't fight for themselves, a defender and a friend.
Captain Feehan's parents flew home to Georgia on board Air Force One, and President Trump acknowledged them at a rally there.
He was a person that was going all the way. We will carry Tyler's memory in our hearts forever.
While saying Iran isn't ready yet to make a deal.
Because every time they make a deal, they want to change it.
Overnight, U.S. forces launched a 12th straight night of strikes against Iran after the president made a new threat to bomb and destroy a bridge or power plant anytime Iran shoots at a ship in the Strait of Hormuz. While in swing state Georgia, he zeroed in on key midterm races, as some Republicans are voicing concerns that the war may hurt the party at the polls, with gas prices again pushing higher.
I think by any objective measure, we're worse off than we were before the war.
President Trump insists Iran is weaker and America safer as the nation mourns those who've paid the price. And the U.S. has now signed a landmark nuclear agreement with Saudi Arabia that a senior administration official told NBC News supports the Saudis creating a civilian nuclear power program built by American companies. Critics, though, fear it could touch off a nuclear arms race in the Middle East. Secretary of State Marco Rubio said the U.S. would not agree to anything that would let that happen. Joe and Savannah.
Alice, we also heard from that one Republican senator in your piece there who is worried about the impact of the war on the midterm elections. Is Congress taking any more action to try and rein in the war?
Yeah, as we've seen the fighting only growing, we have heard more noise on Capitol Hill about trying to get this ramped back down. House Democrats are set to vote on another war powers resolution today, trying to constrain the president's powers to wage war in Iran. And the Senate's top Democrat, Chuck Schumer, now says he's going to lead Senate Democrats in forcing their own similar vote tomorrow. You may remember President Trump has cracked down on Senate Republicans in the past who've bucked him on this issue, and we could see another showdown there again.
All right. Alice in Washington, thank you.
Let's talk more about that U.S.-Saudi nuclear deal that Alice just mentioned with Nicole Grajewski. She's an assistant professor at Science Post Center for International Research and an associate fellow at the French Institute of International Relations. Thank you very much for joining us. So Saudi Arabia has long wanted to pursue nuclear technology as a way of reducing its reliance on fossil fuels. They'd previously said they would look to China or Russia if the U.S. did not partner with them on this. Was this a case of the U.S. trying to get in ahead of those adversaries?
Well, it certainly seems like this was an effort for the U.S. to at least outpace Russia and China in terms of civilian nuclear cooperation with Saudi Arabia. This deal does stipulate kind of the U.S. privileged role in this, and in certain companies such as Westinghouse have expressed their desire to be involved in this. So on one hand, this is the U.S. trying to assert commercial dominance in the civilian nuclear energy sector, especially when it comes to Saudi Arabia, given both Russia and China's interest in cooperation there.
So, Nicole, I mean, critics say this could put the Saudis on a path to a nuclear weapon. It could fuel an arms race in the region. Are you surprised the U.S. is announcing this deal in the middle of the war with Iran, given the goal of the fighting is to try and stop Tehran from getting a nuclear weapon? I mean, could this actually provoke Iran into trying to pursue a weapon?
Yes, certainly. There's a certain degree of irony here because part of the stipulation in this agreement includes the potential right for Saudi Arabia to enrich on their own territory. Notably, this is what Trump has declared as a non-starter for negotiations with Iran. So there's that irony there. Additionally, Saudi Arabia has been quite disillusioned with the current U.S. war in the sense that Saudi has been targeted themselves from the Iranians. So to some extent, this also looks like an effort to quell concerns in Saudi when it comes to the U.S.-Saudi relationship.
Nicole, this deal isn't likely to include the most rigorous levels of inspections by the UN nuclear watchdog. That's the IAEA. Why is that, and what does that tell us?
It's unclear why the Trump administration dropped some of the oversight when it comes to the IAEA or the UN nuclear watchdog. But what it does tell us is that there's far less stringent non-proliferation controls on this. It really seems to be mostly a U.S.-Saudi deal. And this is a departure from the so-called gold standard that the U.S. has dealt with in the past when it does sign agreements like this. So if anything, it's a little bit troubling when we think about broader non-proliferation goals.
All right, Nicole Grajewski, thank you so much for joining us this morning.
In news from Capitol Hill, House Republicans adopted a $95 billion budget proposal yesterday. It's a way to fund the Iran war and some other White House priorities.
Meanwhile, House Judiciary Committee Chairman Jim Jordan formally requested the Justice Department open a criminal investigation of former special counsel Jack Smith, who oversaw the probe into President Trump's efforts to overturn the 2020 election results.
Let's bring in NBC News legal affairs reporter Gary Grumbach. Joins us with more on these headlines. Gary, good morning. So first of all, just what's all in this $95 billion spending package, and does it stand any chance of passing in the Senate?
So this was a package that was passed with only Republican House support. We're talking about $73 billion in military aid, $60 billion going towards the Pentagon, $13 billion going towards intelligence operations, most of that money heading towards the war with Iran and being supportive of what's happening with the war with Iran. It's also going to help farmers here. We're talking about $12 billion that's going to go towards farming and assistance for the farmers that have been really hurt across the country by some of the tariffs that have been imposed on the United States because of the wars that we've seen around the world. And then $10 billion towards election security. And that's crucial here because this is going to get paired with the Save America Act when it heads over to the Senate. And that is that radioactive bill that has been really had no chance of passing through the Senate because of some of the election measures and voting requirement measures that are involved in that legislation, guys.
Gary, what can you tell us about this letter that Jim Jordan sent to the DOJ asking for this criminal investigation of former special counsel Jack Smith? What's he alleging and what's prompting this now?
So what's happening here by Congressman Jim Jordan is a little bit of selective listing of the facts here. So I want to be super clear about what's happening. During his investigation of Donald Trump, special counsel Jack Smith subpoenaed phone companies for the toll records of members of Congress. So that means who called who when, who texted who when, how long they were on the phone for. It does not include actual messages. It does not include any audio of the actual conversations themselves. Separately, Jack Smith also subpoenaed Trump allies for their actual phone records, which would include the messages, which would include the audio of the phone calls. And on those records subpoenaed from the National Archives were members of Congress's messages. Think Peter Navarro or Rudy Giuliani having conversations with members of Congress. That's where those came into play here. Congressman Jim Jordan says that he's going to investigate some lying to Congress by Jack Smith because of that issue. And Jack Smith has long said he does expect to be indicted and get in trouble by this Department of Justice.
Gary, one more headline to get to. The Secret Service says that threats against the people that it's responsible for protecting have jumped. What more can you tell us about this? And are there any concerns about the White House Correspondents Association dinner now scheduled for Friday? Of course, we remember the first attempt was disrupted by violence.
Yeah, the United States Secret Service has said they have been tracking 10,000 threats against the people that they protect. Of course, they protect dozens of people across the federal government. Just this year alone, that's a 40% jump from last year. Secret Service Director Sean Curran told our Kelly O'Donnell yesterday during a briefing they're deploying more resources to make sure that wherever the president goes, he is kept safe, his family and the members of the cabinet are kept safe. That includes this Friday's redo of the White House Correspondents' Dinner. It's going to be held here in D.C. at a different hotel than it was held earlier this year. It's going to be a little bit of a safer location, and there's going to be significantly more security resources put towards this event to ensure nothing like what happened last time happens again, guys.
All right. Gary Grumbach, a lot to cover this morning. Thank you.
Well, Tropical Storm Bertha continues to batter the Gulf Coast, making landfall in southern Louisiana, about 40 miles east of New Orleans.
At landfall, Bertha's maximum sustained winds were around 45 miles an hour. The worst of the rains did stay offshore. That kept the storm from doing any widespread damage.
NBC News correspondent George Solis has been tracking the storm. He joins us now from New Orleans with the latest. George, good morning. So tell us, what have you seen from Bertha? What kind of impact?
Hey, good morning, Savannah. Fortunately, the impacts were minimal. As we forecasted, much of this heavy rain stayed off into the Gulf. However, we did spend some time along some of the coastal communities where we did see some of the heavier rain, some of those stronger gusts, about 40 mile an hour. And it was really intermittent. It was really more of an inconvenience for a lot of residents. Still, officials urged the public to take every necessary precaution. We didn't see a lot of people out on the streets yesterday. A lot of people seemed to shelter in place, which was certainly the right thing to do. But of course, Bertha did have an impact across the Gulf Coast in places like Dauphin Island, Alabama. We saw some vehicles that were covered in sand in Biloxi, Mississippi. Some businesses trying to get out of harm's way. And in Venice, Louisiana here, we saw some people, of course, preparing. We saw some fishermen trying to get some stuff out of their boats. But a lot of people saying they knew this storm wasn't necessarily going to be the heavy hitter, so to speak. But folks in and around, of course, New Orleans are no strangers to severe weather. So they know when something is serious, they want to take every necessary precaution. So we saw in the days leading up to Bertha, people taking all the necessary precautions, from getting their supplies to packing up sandbags to fortify their homes should the flooding get severe. But again, we saw some rain, some wind, and some localized flooding, and even this morning a rain shower or two. But the storm continues moving west. It's supposed to weaken as it makes a second landfall. But again, I got to tell you, a lot of residents here just grateful this was not more severe, guys.
All right, George, thank you so much.
And we are keeping an eye on the track of Tropical Storm Bertha, so let's get all the latest details with your Morning News Now weather.
Angie Lastman joins us. Hey, Angie, good morning.
Hi there, guys. Good morning to you. George said it. We've got still to keep an eye on this system. Tropical Storm Bertha, here's the latest details. Winds at 45 miles per hour, moving at a bit of a quicker pace of 13 miles per hour to the west. Still about 90 plus miles from Lake Charles. That's something that you'll notice here today, kind of that number winding down as this system gets closer to that second landfall that George mentioned. Likely to happen as we get into the evening hours, but still those tropical storm warnings are up across parts of Louisiana and stretching into Texas. We're going to see some, again, same kind of impacts. Not a whole lot of rain, some gusty winds, and those are going to kind of sum up what we'll have for the next 24 hours or so as this system gets closer to land yet again. You can see taking it somewhere right along the coast of Galveston as we get into the evening hours or so tonight, and then eventually weakening as it moves across southern Texas by Friday through the day. Here's the wind gusts. Not all that impressive if you go farther from the coast, but closer to the coast, places like Galveston, you can see a peak wind gust of 44 miles per hour as we get through the day today. And some additional rain, again, especially as that system works west after the landfall, maybe picking up a couple of inches just south of Corpus Christi and stretching to that Texas-Mexico border. Otherwise, we've got a whole lot of rain to talk about across the Carolinas and parts of the mid-Atlantic. This is just going to be kind of hanging around as this system sticks with us. So no surprise that we've got flooding concerns. The flood watches are up from the coast, stretching back to Chattanooga, just to the north of Atlanta. You've got Charlotte, Raleigh, Cape Hatteras included in that, as well as Wilmington, as this kind of stream of rain continues through the day today and potentially kind of winding down into tomorrow. But the stationary front will still stick with us even into the afternoon hours today. So watch for that heavy rainfall. We'll still see kind of the problematic aspects of the flooding, even as we get into tomorrow in some spots spots because we've got these scattered storms kind of developing right as that stationary front kind of hangs around. Either way, the upside of this, the optimism in me is looking at how much of an impact this is going to make on the drought across the southeast. So that is at least one aspect of this. We've got anywhere from 2 to 3, maybe up to 4 and even 5 inches possible, specifically across parts of North Carolina. That's where you'll see the highest amounts and closer to the coast, with these showers sticking around through the day again today. Otherwise, really warm temperatures in a lot of spots. We've got 50 million people across the South, across the Southwest, parts of the Pacific Northwest and the Northern Rockies included in those heat alerts as temperatures gear up to be well above normal yet again. Look at those high 90s across parts of the Northern Plains as we get into tomorrow. If you're looking for the nice conditions, the Great Lakes, the Northeast, really nice kind of temperate, low humidity in some spots as we get through Friday. And looking ahead to your Saturday, another nice day in that same region. But we will be flirting with those record highs across the middle of the country and still dealing with that flood threat across the southeast. And that heat wave continues, unfortunately, for Sunday. If you're looking for some cooler air across the middle of the country, you're just not going to get it. But plenty of sunshine for our friends across the west, guys.
Well, good for them. Angie Lassen, thank you so much.
A trial date for ousted Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro and his wife Celia Flores has now been set for June 1st of next year. The former leader and his wife are facing drug trafficking charges. Both have pleaded not guilty. The pair were captured in Caracas back in January by U.S. forces. Both appeared in court yesterday for a hearing to set the trial dates. Defense lawyers say they will attempt to get the case dismissed, arguing on the grounds of Maduro's immunity as a head of state.
An independent autopsy report is providing more questions than answers in the death of Mississippi teenager Nolan Wells. The report was released yesterday after the 18-year-old was found dead following a 4th of July boat trip. It revealed an inconclusive cause of death pending investigation. The family's attorney says the forensic pathologist they hired could not rule out foul play. NBC News national correspondent Aaron Gilchrist has the latest.
Newly released autopsy results are raising more questions about how Nolan Wells died. An independent exam commissioned by his family's legal team classified the cause and manner of death for the 18-year-old as undetermined pending investigation.
He's saying based on the examination of the body, he cannot rule out foul play. That is significant.
The forensic pathologist wrote there were no fractures, cuts, or bruises on Nolan's body, but noted red discoloration was found on the back of his head and needs more investigation. The autopsy was performed 4 days after his body was found. The pathologist also writing there were missing parts of the neck.
Have you or he asked anyone for access to those things?
Hopefully that the medical examiner will allow him to come and examine the throat, also to talk about observations that they had, and so they could share information.
It is not unusual for a state medical examiner to keep parts for further evaluation. Former medical examiner Dr. Priya Banerjee reviewed the autopsy report.
I think the best thing we can take away is that there's no identifiable trauma.
The Jackson County Sheriff's Office is still investigating what happened after Nolan went to Horn Island in a boat with friends on July 4th. His body was found 2 days later washed ashore there. The family's attorney noted the doctor was unable to examine the airways and lungs for water to determine drowning. In a recent interview, Warren Hudson says he'd been friends with Nolan since they were kids. Hudson said they frequently went boating and they went to Horn Island with a large group of friends on July 4th.
Everybody's drinking, you know, I mean, it's 4th of July. Everyone's just trying to enjoy themselves.
The family's legal team is waiting for the state to finish its toxicology report. At the same time, the state medical examiner's office telling NBC News that it will share appropriate information when the investigation is complete.
All right.
Back to you.
Aaron Gilchrist, thank you. We're joined now by NBC News legal analyst Danny Savalas to break down the latest in this investigation. Danny, good morning. So the independent autopsy was performed July 10th, and that was 4 days after Nolan Wells' body was found. The state conducted its initial autopsy on July 7th. So why would the medical examiner's office hold off on releasing any kind of results? So the idea here being that it essentially happened prior, and yet we still don't have any information from that one. The one that was performed later, we do.
The autopsy is not the report. The autopsy takes a day. The report takes a lot longer. And the holdup is and was probably toxicology. It's going to be critical here because drowning really doesn't have a lot of medical indicators. So you're going to have to take a look at toxicology. And depending on what kind of rush or how backed up a lab is, that can take a long time. You're looking at some of the typical drawings and information you see on a report there on the screen. And keep in mind also that you have a crime scene here where the body was in the water. The crime scene is the water. It's about the worst crime scene that you could ask for. And there could be damage to the body that occurred post-mortem accident damage that happened causing injuries. And those have to be figured out as well.
Danny, what's specifically standing out to you in this investigation right now?
One thing I think that investigators find challenging is that you have some 300 witnesses, people who were at this party, many of whom were probably, well, let's just say compromised or intoxicated. Maybe not, but their memory may not be so great. So you have to get through all of those witnesses. You have a very difficult crime scene, a deserted island and the ocean. Terrible place to do an investigation. Those are going to make really these determinations very, very difficult. Now, at the end of the day, no evidence of foul play is no evidence of foul play. You can take that as either no evidence yet or no evidence ever.
So, Danny, that's interesting because you're saying you're referencing the local investigators saying they have not found signs of foul play. But what I just mentioned a moment ago here spikes my interest. The forensic pathologist that was hired by the Wells family allegedly said he couldn't rule it out either. I think to your point, that still means it hasn't been found. It just can't be ruled out. But what evidence do officials need to declare someone's death a homicide, to determine that there was foul play?
Well, when you declare someone's death a homicide, that's a medical opinion. It's not a criminal charge. The manner of death falls into 5 categories. You have homicide, you have accident, you have suicide, you can have undetermined. And those are really just checking a box by the medical examiner. And by the way, sometimes the medical examiner reaches a different conclusion than prosecutors, and defense attorneys have a field day with that. But that is not the final say determining the manner of death. They will also determine the cause of death, which is more of a medical cause of death rather than homicide, suicide, accident, or something else. So those are the distinctions there. But that finding by the medical examiner is not an indictment by itself.
Danny, from a process standpoint, how long do you see the local sheriff's office taking to finish its investigation? And then what happens after that, especially with this sort of parallel information that the family's gathering?
Normally, it would take a long time. And now, because of the intense pressure and scrutiny of this case, it's going to take a longer time. It's human nature. These are investigators who probably this is the biggest case of their lives. They know they're being scrutinized. So they're going to be extra careful, especially given the fact that early on, critics have pointed to the fact that they said there's no evidence of foul play. And so a lot of critics say they rushed to conclusions that their investigation led them towards simply an accidental drowning. And by the way, all we have so far still indicates that could be an accidental drowning. However, for that reason, you can expect investigators, because of this outside pressure, to take even longer than they normally would because they know the world is watching.
Danny Savalos, thank you so much.
We thank you for watching. And remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.